Did you just do that in front of 200 passengers? The question hung in the air like turbulence before a storm. For a moment, nobody in the first-class cabin moved. Nobody reached for a drink. Nobody looked away. Every eye was locked on seat 2A, where Monica Hayes sat perfectly still, her expression calm, almost impossibly calm, while the silence around her grew heavier with each passing second. The flight from Seattle to New York had been scheduled to depart at exactly 8:15 a.m. Boarding was nearly complete. The overhead bins were closed. Flight attendants moved through the aisle with practiced smiles. Everything looked normal. Then one decision shattered the routine. Monica Hayes, a black woman in her mid-40s, sat quietly by the window wearing dark jeans, white sneakers, and a simple black sweater. No designer labels. No jewelry worth noticing. No assistant. No entourage. To most people around her, she looked like an ordinary traveler who had somehow wandered into the wrong section of the aircraft. A few minutes earlier, a senior flight attendant named Nicole Reynolds had approached her seat with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake," Nicole had said. Monica calmly showed her boarding pass. "Seat 2A. First class. Confirmed." Nicole barely looked at it. Instead, she glanced toward a well-dressed white passenger standing nearby, and then back at Monica. "This seat isn't available to you," she said. Monica remained seated. "According to my ticket, it is." Several passengers exchanged uncomfortable looks. Nicole's smile disappeared. Her tone sharpened. "You need to move." Monica's voice stayed even. "No, I don't." The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop. The passenger waiting in the aisle folded his arms. Another flight attendant arrived. Then another. What should have taken 10 seconds suddenly became the center of attention for everyone in first class. Monica noticed the stares. She had seen them before. The assumptions. The silent calculations. The instant judgment based on appearance. Yet she didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply sat there as if anchored to the seat itself. Nicole leaned closer. "You're creating a problem for everyone." Monica met her gaze. "No, I'm refusing to become one." A murmur spread through the cabin. The words landed harder than anyone expected. Nicole's face tightened. Whatever patience she had left vanished. Her reaction drew even more attention from nearby passengers, and within seconds the atmosphere shifted from inconvenience to confrontation. A young woman seated across the aisle lowered her tablet and watched carefully. A businessman near the front stopped reading emails. Even the cabin crew seemed uncertain about where things were headed. Monica remained composed. That calmness irritated Nicole more than any argument could have. People often expect power to announce itself. They expect confidence to arrive wearing expensive suits and flashing credentials. Monica offered none of those things. She simply refused to surrender her seat. Then came the moment that changed everything. A brief exchange. A sudden gesture. A collective gasp from nearby passengers. The cabin froze. Nicole stepped back. Monica slowly turned her head and looked around at the stunned faces surrounding her. Her voice remained steady, but now every word carried weight. "Remember this moment," she said quietly, "because this flight is about to become very different." And for the first time all morning, several people began wondering who the woman in seat 2A really was. 23 minutes before the confrontation in first class, Monica Hayes stepped through gate C14, carrying nothing more than a small black travel bag and a phone that had not stopped buzzing all morning. She ignored every notification. That was intentional. At 44 years old, Monica had spent 2 decades building one of the fastest-growing aviation companies in the United States. Yet some of her most important work happened when nobody knew who she was. The airport around her moved with its usual rhythm. Families hurried toward boarding groups. Business travelers balanced coffee cups and laptop bags. Gate agents repeated announcements that blended into the background like white noise. Monica walked through it all unnoticed. That was exactly how she preferred it. 3 months earlier, Aurora Air Group had received a troubling pattern of customer complaints. Individually, each report seemed minor. Together, they told a different story. Travelers described being questioned about premium seats they had legitimately purchased. Some said they were treated differently because of their appearance. Others claimed crew members made assumptions before checking records. The reports never generated headlines, but Monica read every one of them personally. Numbers mattered. Revenue mattered. Safety mattered. But reputation mattered too. That was why she was on this flight. No press release. No executive team. No security detail. Just Monica. She scanned her boarding pass and entered the jet bridge alone. The gate scanner flashed green immediately. A gate attendant smiled and welcomed her aboard without hesitation. Everything seemed normal. The aircraft itself was a brand new narrow-body jet valued at nearly $100 million. Monica had approved the purchase personally. She knew the specifications. She knew the maintenance records. She even knew the names of the executives who negotiated the contract. Yet she boarded like any other passenger and quietly made her way towards seat 2A. A young flight attendant arranging magazines near the galley greeted her politely. Monica returned the smile. For a moment, she thought this inspection might end uneventfully. Then she noticed something. A well-dressed white passenger standing near the front of the cabin was speaking with a senior crew member. The conversation stopped the moment Monica approached. Their eyes followed her briefly before shifting away. It was subtle, easy to miss. Monica did not react. She had learned long ago that the smallest moments often revealed the biggest truths. She settled into her seat beside the window and looked out across the runway. Beyond the glass, ground crews moved with mechanical precision beneath a gray Seattle sky. The scene reminded her of another flight years earlier. She had been 22, fresh out of graduate school, carrying a borrowed suitcase and a dream bigger than her bank account. A gate employee had questioned whether she belonged in a premium boarding lane despite her valid ticket. She remembered the embarrassment. She remembered the people staring. Most of all, she remembered promising herself that success would never make her forget moments like that. The memory faded as boarding continued. Monica checked the time. She expected data. She expected observations. She did not expect what was about to happen. Across the aisle, passengers settled into their seats. Overhead bins clicked shut one by one. The aircraft was nearly ready to depart. And somewhere near the front galley, a series of decisions had already begun, moving quietly towards seat 2A. The moment boarding officially ended, the atmosphere inside first class changed in ways most passengers would never notice. It was not a loud change. It was quieter than that, more calculated. Nicole Reynolds stood near the front galley speaking in low tones with another senior crew member while occasionally glancing towards seat 2A. Monica Hayes noticed every look without appearing to notice any of them. Years of leading negotiations worth billions of dollars had taught her that people often revealed their intentions long before they revealed their actions. Across the aisle, the well-dressed passenger she had seen earlier finally took his seat in 2C. His name was Richard Bennett, a real estate investor known in several East Coast business circles. He carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to receiving special treatment. As he settled into his seat, Nicole approached him with a smile far warmer than the one she had offered Monica. Their conversation lasted only a few seconds, but Monica saw Richard glance toward her twice before nodding. The exchange was brief. The meaning behind it was not. A few moments later, Nicole returned. This time she was accompanied by another crew member named Brian Foster. Brian crossed his arms and studied Monica's boarding pass as if searching for a flaw that did not exist. Monica calmly handed it over. Brian examined it. The seat assignment was correct. The boarding scan was valid. The passenger name matched government identification. Everything checked out. Yet neither crew member seemed satisfied. The problem was no longer the ticket. The problem was Monica herself. The cabin lights glowed softly overhead as passengers settled into the final minutes before departure. Laptops opened. Headphones appeared. Conversations faded. Yet tension continued building around a single seat near the front of the aircraft. Nicole lowered her voice. Several concerns have been raised about seating assignments. Monica looked directly at her. By whom? Nicole hesitated. Passengers. Monica glanced around the cabin. Nobody was speaking. Nobody appeared concerned. The answer felt manufactured. Brian shifted his weight and added, "Sometimes mistakes happen during boarding." Monica remained composed. "Then you should be able to identify the mistake." Neither crew member responded. The silence spoke for them. A businessman seated 2 rows back lowered his newspaper. An older woman near the aisle stopped scrolling through her phone. People were beginning to pay attention. What started as a routine flight was slowly becoming something else. Nicole's professional smile returned, but it looked strained now. "Perhaps it would be easier if you accepted another seat." Monica folded her hands. "I purchased this one." It would only be temporary. Then the person assigned to another seat should move temporarily. Richard Bennett let out a short laugh from across the aisle. The sound carried farther than he intended. Several passengers looked toward him. He quickly returned his attention to his tablet, but the damage was done. The cabin no longer felt neutral. Sides were beginning to form. Monica noticed a young flight attendant near the galley watching everything unfold. Unlike the others, she looked uncomfortable. Her name tag read Emily Carter. More than once she appeared ready to speak before stopping herself. Something in her expression suggested she knew more than she was saying. Nicole noticed her too and immediately shot her a warning glance. Emily looked away, but not before Monica caught the concern in her eyes. Outside the window, a baggage vehicle rolled away from the aircraft. Inside, another kind of movement was already underway. The crew believed they were managing a passenger issue. They had not yet realized they were creating a much larger one. Emily Carter had been with Aurora Airlines for less than 8 months, but she already understood something many veterans forgot. Systems did not fail all at once. They failed one decision at a time. Standing near the front galley, she watched Nicole Reynolds and Brian Foster continue circling Monica Hayes as if they were trying to justify a conclusion they had already reached. The longer she watched, the worse it looked. Emily remembered the boarding process clearly. She had personally assisted at the aircraft door during priority boarding. She remembered Monica's ticket because there had been nothing unusual about it. The scanner flashed green. The seat assignment was correct. The identification matched. Everything had been routine. Yet somehow routine had transformed into suspicion. Emily glanced toward the electronic manifest on her crew tablet. Seat 2A still displayed the same name it always had. Monica Hayes. Confirmed passenger. Confirmed ticket. Confirmed boarding status. No alerts. No warnings. No issues. The facts were simple. The behavior around those facts was not. Across the cabin, passengers were paying attention now. The older woman near the aisle had stopped pretending to read her magazine. The businessman 2 rows back no longer looked at his laptop screen. Even several passengers in the main cabin had begun peeking forward to see what was happening. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the aircraft itself were holding its breath. Emily looked toward Monica. What surprised her most was not the woman's confidence. It was her patience. Most travelers would have become frustrated by now. Some would have raised their voices. Others would have demanded supervisors. Monica did none of those things. She simply answered questions with questions and remained seated as though she had nowhere else she needed to be. That calmness unsettled the crew more than any argument could have. Nicole noticed Emily watching. "Do you need something?" she asked sharply. The question was not really a question. It was a warning. Emily hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay quiet. She was the newest crew member on board. Nicole had influence. Brian had seniority. The captain trusted both of them. Speaking up could create problems she did not need. Yet another voice inside her refused to let the moment pass. She stepped forward. "Actually, I scanned her ticket myself during boarding." The words landed harder than she expected. Nicole's expression tightened immediately. Brian turned toward her. Several passengers looked up. Even Richard Bennett glanced away from his tablet. Emily continued before she lost her nerve. Everything matched. There were no boarding issues. Silence spread across the cabin. For a second, nobody responded. Monica looked at Emily for the first time and gave a small nod. It was not dramatic. It was not emotional. But it felt like recognition. Nicole recovered quickly. "Thank you, Emily. We can handle it from here." The dismissal was immediate. Professional on the surface. Cold underneath. Emily stepped back, but she did not stop paying attention. Something about the entire situation felt wrong. Quietly, she opened the notes application on her phone and began documenting the timeline. Times. Names. Statements. Observations. Nothing emotional. Just facts. If this continued, she wanted a record. Near the window, Monica turned her attention back toward the runway. The aircraft should have been pushing back from the gate soon. Instead, the confrontation continued growing. Emily sensed something else as well. Monica Hayes was not worried. Not even slightly. Whatever everyone else believed was happening inside this cabin, Monica seemed to know a chapter of the story that nobody else had read yet. The captain finally became aware that something unusual was unfolding in first class. A few moments later, Captain Daniel Mercer stepped out from the cockpit and walked toward the front of the cabin with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to solving problems quickly. He listened as Nicole Reynolds summarized the situation. The explanation was brief, selective, and carefully framed. By the time she finished speaking, the issue sounded less like a misunderstanding and more like a passenger refusing to cooperate. Daniel turned toward Monica Hayes. "Ma'am, I am told there is a dispute regarding seating." Monica met his gaze calmly. "There is no dispute regarding the seat. There is only a dispute regarding who certain people believe belongs in it." Several nearby passengers exchanged glances. The statement landed heavily because everyone understood exactly what she meant. Daniel asked to see her boarding pass. Monica handed it over without hesitation. He reviewed it. Seat 2A. Valid. Properly issued. Correctly scanned. The facts remained unchanged. Yet instead of ending the matter, the conversation somehow continued. Nicole immediately began discussing passenger concerns, operational efficiency, and departure delays. The words sounded official. The logic behind them felt increasingly fragile. Emily Carter watched from the galley, growing more uncomfortable with every passing minute. She noticed something that others seemed to ignore. Monica was answering every question directly. The crew, meanwhile, kept changing the subject. Around the cabin, attention shifted completely away from phones and laptops. The aircraft no longer felt like a flight preparing for departure. It felt like a room waiting for a verdict. Then came another escalation. Nicole suggested that airport supervisors might need to become involved. Brian mentioned documentation. Someone referenced possible noncompliance procedures. None of it matched the reality Emily had witnessed from the beginning. Monica remained remarkably composed. Yet beneath that calm exterior, an old memory resurfaced. 22 years earlier, she had stood alone at another airport after being questioned repeatedly despite having every document required to travel. She remembered sitting near a terminal window watching a plane depart without her. She remembered the embarrassment of strangers looking at her as though she had done something wrong. Most people would have carried resentment from that experience. Monica carried resolve instead. That memory had helped shape the leader she eventually became. Back in the present, she looked around the cabin and realized something important. The faces were different. The uniforms were different. The decade was different. But the assumptions felt painfully familiar. The older woman near the aisle finally spoke. She has shown her ticket several times. What exactly is the issue? No one answered immediately. A businessman seated behind her added, "From where I am sitting, she appears to be in the correct seat." The comments shifted the atmosphere. For the first time, passengers were openly questioning the crew's actions. Nicole's confidence flickered. Brian stopped speaking altogether. Emily quietly recorded another note in her timeline. The situation had moved beyond a disagreement. It had become a test of judgment. Monica glanced out the window. The aircraft should have been moving by now. Instead, it remained connected to the gate. Ground crews continued working below. Minutes passed. Then Monica reached into her bag and picked up her phone. Her expression did not change. Her breathing remained steady. She tapped a single contact and waited for the call to connect. When a familiar voice answered, Monica spoke only 7 words. "It is time. Activate Protocol 7 immediately." The person on the other end responded without surprise. "Understood, Ms. Hayes. We are ready." Emily noticed the shift instantly. Monica's calm had always suggested confidence. Now it suggested certainty. And somewhere beyond the aircraft, invisible wheels had already begun turning. The effect of the phone call was invisible at first. No alarm sounded. No announcements interrupted the cabin. Nothing dramatic happened immediately. That was what made it unsettling. Monica Hayes slipped her phone back into her bag and returned her attention to the window as though she had simply completed another routine conversation. Around her, however, the tension continued building. Nicole Reynolds interpreted Monica's calm as surrender. Brian Foster interpreted it as bluffing. Captain Daniel Mercer viewed it as the final stage of a difficult passenger interaction. All three arrived at the same conclusion. They were wrong. 3,000 miles away from New York and several layers above the authority of everyone currently standing in the aircraft, a different conversation had already begun. Angela Brooks, Monica's executive assistant for nearly 12 years, received the call and immediately activated a chain of notifications. Legal counsel, operations leadership, corporate compliance, executive security, board representatives. Within minutes, dozens of people who rarely received the same message at the same time were reviewing information connected to Flight 728. Back inside the aircraft, none of that was visible. Nicole took another step towards seat 2A. "We are delaying departure for everyone on board," she said. "I hope you understand the consequences of that." Monica looked up. "Do you?" The question caught Nicole off guard. It was delivered so calmly that she almost missed the warning hidden inside it. Across the aisle, Richard Bennett shifted uneasily in his seat. Earlier, he had seemed amused. Now he looked uncertain. The confidence that came from believing he understood the situation was beginning to fade. Emily Carter noticed it too. She had stopped wondering whether Monica was right. The evidence already answered that question. What Emily could not understand was why Monica seemed entirely unconcerned about the outcome. Most passengers feared authority. Monica appeared to be waiting for it. Several rows back, the older woman who had spoken earlier folded her magazine and set it aside completely. "This should have ended 30 minutes ago," she said aloud. A few passengers nodded in agreement. The cabin was no longer observing the situation. It was judging it. Captain Mercer sensed the shift. Public opinion inside the aircraft was moving away from the crew, and every passing minute made that more obvious. He requested one final review of the passenger manifest through the onboard system. The results came back exactly as before. Monica Hayes, confirmed passenger. Seat 2A. No irregularities. No alerts. No restrictions. The facts refused to cooperate with the narrative that had formed around them. Then something unexpected happened. The aircraft doors remained open. Ground crews stopped preparing for departure. A maintenance supervisor appeared outside the window and spoke with a gate representative. Moments later, another airport employee arrived. Then another. Passengers began noticing. Conversations spread through the cabin. Why were they still at the gate? Why had boarding equipment not been removed? Why was nobody pushing back from the terminal? Nicole looked toward the front windows and frowned. That was not normal. Neither was the message that suddenly appeared on the crew operations tablet in her hand. She read it once. Then again. Her expression changed immediately. Brian noticed. "What is it?" he asked. Nicole did not answer right away. For the first time all morning, uncertainty replaced confidence. Meanwhile, Monica remained perfectly still. Her eyes moved briefly from the window to the growing activity outside the aircraft. Then she glanced at her watch. Almost on schedule. Emily caught the movement and felt a chill run through her. Whatever Protocol 7 was, it had already arrived. The message on Nicole Reynolds' tablet was only 3 lines long, but it drained the color from her face. She stared at the screen as though it had suddenly switched languages. Brian Foster leaned closer. "What happened?" he asked. Nicole swallowed before answering. "Corporate operations has placed the aircraft on administrative hold." The words spread through the cabin faster than any announcement could have. Passengers exchanged confused looks. Administrative hold was not weather. It was not maintenance. It was not air traffic control. It was something else. Captain Daniel Mercer immediately stepped forward and requested additional information through the crew system. The response arrived seconds later. Flight 728 was not authorized to leave the gate. Further instructions were pending. Daniel read the notice twice. Then a third time. Around him, uncertainty replaced authority. Outside the aircraft, activity intensified. 2 airport operations vehicles stopped beside the jet bridge. Several officials entered the terminal. None of them looked hurried. That was what made the moment feel even more serious. They were not responding to a crisis. They were executing a plan. Inside the cabin, the older woman near the aisle shook her head. "I have been flying for 40 years, she said quietly. "I have never seen anything like this." Nobody disagreed. Emily Carter watched the reactions carefully. The same people who had spent the last hour questioning Monica Hayes now seemed unable to explain what was happening. Yet Monica herself appeared entirely unsurprised. She sat calmly beside the window, hands folded, posture relaxed, as though events were unfolding exactly according to schedule. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Richard Bennett finally spoke. "Who exactly are you?" The question hung in the air. Several passengers turned toward Monica. Even Nicole and Brian stopped checking their devices. For the first time all morning, the entire cabin wanted the same answer. Monica looked around slowly. She saw confusion. She saw concern. She saw people trying to connect pieces of a puzzle that suddenly seemed much larger than a seating dispute. Then she stood. The movement alone changed the atmosphere. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Even the noise from the terminal outside seemed distant. Monica's voice was calm when she finally spoke. The problem was never this seat. Nobody interrupted. The problem was what certain people decided about me before they checked the facts. Nicole looked down. Brian remained silent. Captain Mercer said nothing at all. Monica continued. You questioned my right to sit here. You questioned my ticket. You questioned whether I belonged on this aircraft. Her gaze moved briefly across the front cabin. Not because of evidence. Because of assumptions. The silence grew heavier. Then came the moment that changed everything. Monica reached into her bag and removed a small identification case. She opened it and held it where the crew could clearly see it. Captain Mercer looked first. His expression shifted immediately. Nicole saw it next. The tablet nearly slipped from her hands. Brian stared in disbelief. Monica's voice remained steady. My name is Monica Hayes. A pause. Then the truth landed. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Aurora Air Group. No one moved. No one spoke. The cabin felt frozen in place. Emily closed her eyes for a second because suddenly everything made sense. The confidence. The patience. The phone call. The administrative hold. Monica looked directly at Nicole. You believed I was sitting in a seat that did not belong to me. Her words cut through the silence like a blade. The reality is much simpler. You were questioning authority you never recognized. And in that moment, every assumption made during the flight collapsed at once. For several seconds after the revelation, nobody in first class seemed capable of speaking. The silence felt larger than the aircraft itself. Captain Daniel Mercer stared at Monica Hayes as though every event of the morning had suddenly rearranged itself into a completely different story. Nicole Reynolds lowered her eyes to the floor. Brian Foster looked toward the cabin door, searching for an explanation that no longer existed. Outside the aircraft, the jet bridge remained connected. Ground personnel continued moving with deliberate purpose. Inside, the consequences had finally arrived. Monica did not raise her voice. She did not celebrate. She simply stood beside seat 2A and allowed the truth to settle over the room. Her phone rang. The caller identification displayed Angela Brooks. Monica answered on speaker. Everything is in place, Angela said. Corporate compliance, legal counsel, operations leadership, and the executive review committee are all present. Every word echoed through the silent cabin. Angela continued. We have completed an initial review of the incident timeline. Statements from crew members, passenger observations, gate records, and operational logs have already been secured. Nicole closed her eyes briefly. Emily Carter listened carefully. The notes she had documented now carried even greater significance than she realized. Monica nodded. Proceed. Angela's voice remained calm and professional. Effective immediately, Flight 728 will remain grounded pending formal review. Certain employee credentials have been temporarily suspended while the investigation is completed. Almost instantly, several crew tablets emitted notification tones. Brian looked down first. His access screen displayed a restricted authorization notice. Nicole checked hers next. The result was identical. Neither device would allow access to normal crew functions. The reality of the situation became impossible to ignore. Captain Mercer received a separate notification. His flight authorization remained active, but he had been instructed not to depart until executive review representatives arrived. Across the cabin, passengers watched the process unfold in real time. It felt less like punishment and more like accountability. The older woman near the aisle slowly shook her head. All of this because nobody wanted to verify the facts. Nobody challenged her observation. Richard Bennett stared at the floor. Earlier certainty had vanished completely. Emily Carter felt something different. Relief. Not because anyone was losing authority, but because the truth no longer needed defending. Monica looked toward her. Thank you for speaking when it mattered. Emily blinked in surprise. I only told the truth. Monica smiled slightly. That is usually harder than people think. Moments later, 3 senior corporate representatives entered the aircraft through the jet bridge. Their appearance confirmed everything. They greeted Monica respectfully before beginning private discussions with the captain and crew leadership. No shouting followed. No dramatic confrontation. The professionalism of the response made it even more powerful. Systems that had failed were now correcting themselves. Procedures that had been ignored were being examined. Assumptions that had guided decisions were finally being exposed. Monica returned to her seat by the window and looked out across the runway. The aircraft remained motionless, but for the first time all morning, the atmosphere inside felt clear. Not comfortable, not easy, clear. The misunderstanding was over. The facts were established, and every person on board now understood why the airplane had never left the gate. Nearly 2 hours after passengers first boarded the aircraft, the atmosphere inside the cabin felt completely different. The tension that had dominated the morning was gone. In its place sat something quieter and far more powerful: reflection. People were no longer focused on delays or schedules. They were thinking about what they had witnessed. A flight that should have been routine had become a lesson nobody expected. Monica Hayes remained seated by the window for a few moments longer, watching service vehicles move across the runway beneath the gray Seattle sky. The same airport that had once reminded her of painful memories now offered something else: closure. Not because she had won an argument, not because authority had intervened, but because the truth had finally been allowed to stand on its own. One by one, passengers began approaching her. The older woman who had spoken earlier stopped beside seat 2A first. "Thank you," she said simply. Monica smiled. "For what?" The woman looked around the cabin. "For not leaving when it would have been easier." Monica nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes leaving solves the moment. Staying solves the problem." The woman smiled and continued down the aisle. A few minutes later, another passenger approached. Then another. Some offered support. Others offered apologies for remaining silent. Monica accepted every conversation with the same calm grace she had shown all morning. Across the cabin, Emily Carter was completing paperwork requested by corporate representatives. Her hands moved quickly, but her thoughts remained on everything that had happened. Monica walked over before preparing to leave the aircraft. "You have a bright future ahead of you," she said. Emily looked surprised. "Because I spoke up?" Monica shook her head. "Because you chose facts over comfort." Emily would remember those words for the rest of her career. Near the front of the cabin, Captain Daniel Mercer stood quietly reviewing instructions from corporate leadership. The morning had challenged assumptions he did not realize he carried. It was uncomfortable, but growth often was. Monica stopped briefly before him. There was no anger in her expression, no triumph, only professionalism. Daniel thanked her for her patience. Monica answered with a simple truth. Respect is not tested when things are easy. It is tested when people think nobody important is watching. The words lingered long after she walked away. Eventually, Monica picked up her bag and made her way toward the aircraft door. The cabin parted naturally as she passed. Not because of her title, not because she controlled the company, because people finally saw her clearly. Outside the aircraft, executives and airport personnel waited near the jet bridge. Monica paused once before stepping into the terminal. She turned back toward the cabin filled with passengers who had witnessed the entire morning unfold. Then she delivered the final thought that many would later repeat to friends and family. First class was never about the seat. It was about the standard. The moment we decide someone's value before learning their story, we lower that standard for everyone. The cabin remained silent as she stepped through the doorway and disappeared into the terminal. Hours later, passengers would reach New York on a different aircraft. Most would eventually forget the delay. They would forget the schedules and the inconvenience. But they would remember the lesson. They would remember the woman who never raised her voice. They would remember how quickly assumptions collapsed when confronted by facts. And they would remember that true authority does not announce itself. It reveals itself when character is tested. Monica Hayes never stopped that airplane because she was powerful. The airplane stopped because the truth mattered more than the timetable. And long after the runway cleared and the day moved on, one message remained. Dignity does not come from a title, a uniform, a seat assignment, or a bank account. Dignity belongs to every person the moment they walk through the door. The people who understand that build stronger companies. The people who forget it eventually learn why it matters.